Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Dean Murray. Dean Murray represents the 3rd Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes parts of Suffolk County. We want to thank you folks on Long Island for joining us. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you, Dean Murray. We got lots to get caught up on here at the state capitol. We're out of the budget stuff now.
That's it.
Budget's done.
Right.
We're moving on.
That's it.
And the governor seems
for better
to be,
or worse.
Well, we'll let you decide.
Right.
We'll let the folks watching
Right.
decide. The governor says he now all of a sudden has this newfound priority that he thinks paroled felons in New York State should be allowed the right to vote. Apparently that's a big deal for some people.
Well, I think it's a big deal because there's a Democratic primary coming up, so it's a big deal for some person.
No, wait, you're not telling me that things are happening in Albany because of political reasons.
Shocker. Shocker. I know.
Well,
Yeah.
big surprise. I hope we didn't offend
That's right.
the
That's right.
sensibilities of some of you folks, but what's going on?
Listen, the governor comes out with this cockamamie scheme of let's let convicted felons who are out on parole have the right to vote. Now, there's a reason. You know, I went back and forth on social media with a couple of people, and one person in particular saying that, you know, this is a right, and if they're out, they should be given this right, and they should do it. Well, freedom is a right, but when you break the law and you go to prison, that freedom is taken away because you chose to break the law. You knew the consequences and you chose to do it. Having your voting rights taken away also is a consequence of not being able to live by society's laws. Live with it. That's the deal. You know, as the old saying, or the old Beretta thing, you know, you do the time, do the crime, you do the time. Right. It's that simple. When you're out on parole, you have not completed your sentence. And that's a very important part of this. He kept saying, well, they're out in public and we want them to assimilate back into public. Well, understand something. They're not finished with their sentence. They are not finished serving their time and paying their debt to society. It's when you are then off parole and you're no longer reporting to a parole officer and you no longer have restrictions on what you can do, your movements and whether you can own a gun and things like this. That's when you're done. And by the way, I do find it interesting that the governor chose to do partial pardons of about 36,000 convicted criminals. Partial pardon meaning you are pardoned so you will have the right to vote. You will not get any of your other rights back. You will never own a gun. You don't get that. You're not that good yet. You're not back in society that much. Just enough to vote. And by the way, don't forget to vote in the primary.
Early and often.
Come on.
Early
come on.
and
this
often.
This is so
right?
blatantly obvious and disgusting. And what makes it worse is the Herman Bell aspect. And for those that don't know, Herman Bell is the convicted cop killer. So in 1971, he was part of the Black Liberation Movement. He and his cohorts called 911 to get police officers to respond. Now, these officers are flying down the road, sirens on, cutting time off their arrival, little knowing that the time they're cutting off is time of their life, because what they did was ambush them. They called in a fake 911, got the police to respond, and when they did, they executed them. One of them point blank right in the head. Then the other one, they played with him, made him beg for his life, shot him 22 times. And this was 2 police officers in New York. Let's not forget about the San Francisco police officer that Herman Bell murdered. And yet, this guy comes up for parole, and this governor's parole board says, sure, we think you can go back in society. And they grant him parole. That is the most disgusting slap in the face to every law enforcement officer, to the family members of every law enforcement officer that I've ever seen. This guy doesn't belong out in public. He belongs under the prison. There's just no excuse for letting this guy out. Now, the cherry on top, the governor wants him to vote. Where are the rights of the police officers? Where are the rights of his victims?
And I just take the step back and I look at this and I figure, who was asking for this? Where was the clamoring for this to happen anyway?
You know what? I think all of it was because there is a race right now between Governor Cuomo and Cynthia Nixon. Who can get to the left and be as progressive and as liberal as possible the fastest? Cynthia Nixon says 100% renewable energy by 2050. Okay? That's because the governor said 50% by 2030. They're just running as far to the left, as quickly to the left as possible with no regard for consequences. And in this particular situation, as you said, who was screaming and yelling for this in the first place? But then to not only grant this sacred, and I say privilege because men and women have given their lives for our right to vote. Right. So to me, it is a privilege to go vote. But now you want to give that and return that privilege to murderers, rapists, child molesters, drug dealers. This is who will be voting. This is who will be picking our political leaders.
There's an awful lot of people in different parts of upstate New York, Long Island, that are not. You wonder if there's going to be a backlash on something like this.
I certainly hope so. There should be, because again, this is just, and the fact that the governor did it with an executive order.
Right. The legislature
would
never have gone along with something like this.
No, they have. The other interesting thing was the interesting comment by the governor, who claims that he was trying to negotiate this during the budget process. Yet Senator Flanagan flat out said this never came up, not once. The governor's excuse for doing an executive order was, well, I'm not going to wait for the legislature to do it. If they're not going to do it, I will. Well, you didn't even discuss it. It wasn't even brought up. Right. No, it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't on anyone's radar. But it got on there when Cynthia Nixon said, I'm more progressive than you are.
Amazing thing. That's how things happen here at the state capitol sometimes.
Very unfortunate.
While we're on the subject of voting, a bill did come up before the legislature on early voting. Now, I remember during the last election, the 2016 presidential election, hearing that many states, there was this thing called early voting.
Right.
Honestly, it was the first I had heard of it. I had no idea what it was. They open up, instead of everybody gathering on a single day, election day, it opens up the ballots for a week or so.
8 days. Yeah.
8 days before election day,
right.
Saying that if you want to be able to, if you want to go in and vote, you can do it now. You don't have to wait till what we traditionally here in New York State have always referred to as election day.
Right, right.
That's kind of a crazy idea. I was really surprised to hear about it, but it seems to be catching on in popularity.
Again, it's one of these things where, well, they did it, it must be good. But the fact is, there's no evidence to show that this improves voting turnout. The whole angle is people are upset because the voter turnout has been low. Mm-hmm. So the governor's answer is, well, why don't we just let convicted felons vote then? And then the Democrats to the left, their answer is, well, it must be too difficult to vote. Let's make it easier to vote, make it more convenient. People are having a hard time getting to the polls. I love this one, and this is like a Yogi Bearism. Because, remember the old statement when he said, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded?
Right, the restaurants, right.
Well, similar to this, nobody wants to go vote anymore because the lines are too long. What? So, we either need to increase voter turnout or the lines are too long and we need to speed it up. Right. Now, if you wanted to add a couple of more polling sites to speed it up, okay, but adding days and expense at the cost of literally millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to open it up. And there's no evidence it actually increases voter turnout.
And you spoke right to that point when you got up and debated this when it came up before the New York State Assembly. Let's go to the floor, listen to some of what Dean Murray had to say, and we'll be back to finish up today's edition of Assembly Calendar.
We happen to just disagree on what may be termed as obvious. Because as my colleague had stated to him, it's obvious if you make it easier, it'll make it better. I fail to see the difficult part as it is. Voting is actually very, very, very easy. You register to vote. The registration process is quite easy as well. You register to vote, and you can find your registration forms at a post office, DMV, library, state and county public assistance offices, local board of elections office. You can even get it online, download it, fill it out, and mail it in. Then on election day, you show up to your polling place, and you vote. It's that easy. As far as whether we want to make it easier, we took a vote a couple of bills ago that I think was the absolute best way to ensure more participation, and that was with the no excuse absentee ballot. I think that's a great move that will not cost us millions of taxpayer dollars. But I want to get back to the obvious, because I judge things when we use words like obvious, I judge them on facts. Facts make it easy for me to consider something as obvious. So how about these facts? According to the boards of elections of all of the 50 states, in the 2016 general election, there were 33 states offering early voting. Voter turnout in those states was 61.6%. Of the states that did not offer early voting, the voter turnout was 63.9%, about 2.5 percentage points higher, which shows that, to back up some of these earlier studies that were done, that not only does it not improve the voter turnout, it may, in fact, drop it a little bit.
One of the things that struck me, and I heard this from one of your colleagues who stood up and debated against it, or at least had some real concerns about it, is that during the process of voting in that 2016 presidential election, people were voting in primaries, and the candidates that they voted for dropped out before the actual election day.
Right. There was also a scandal. The Comey letter that came out regarding Hillary Clinton's emails and the investigation being opened up again came about 10 days prior to.
Right.
So again, you have to wonder, for those that did it, did they want to grab their vote back?
Do-over.
Right. There's a reason we wait until election day to do it. So all of the information is in and everything gets in. But there's so many other reasons.
A level playing field, too, because if you vote early and then something changes, like what you said, well, then you didn't have all the information that other people had that are going in to vote.
Right. That's exactly right. But there's so many other aspects, because so the under this bill, you would need, for every 50,000 voters, you would need a polling site. So keep in mind, you're used to going here to the firehouse to vote. But under this plan, on election day, you still will go there. But for the 8 days prior, you'll go somewhere else. So it gets very, very confusing.
Right.
You will also have many, many, many more election districts in one polling place, because the maximum number you can have in each county is 7. So you will have very condensed with a lot of polling places in one location. For that reason, do you know how many different ballots will have to be on hand and they'll have to keep track of to make sure you're voting for the person where you live and not the council person or the assembly person or the
highway
clerk over here
superintendent or whatever it might be.
That alone. Now let's talk about this. Do you really want a school to be a voting place and that school to have access to everyone for 8 days straight without ID, without anything? Is that really safe for the kids?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues.
A lot of issues
here. You know, one of the other things I thought of as we were going through and talking about voting by paroled felons and all these things, I just heard somebody float an idea that illegal aliens, well, they should be allowed to vote too.
Well, what time? Yeah, give it a little while. I'm sure the governor will introduce that.
It's crazy.
And we'll continue to push back.
It's an interesting place here at the, but just like it is in Washington, it's getting to be kind of a strange place here at the state capitol right now too. Right? If you folks watching want to know how you can reach out to your representative, easy thing for you to do. You can get a hold of Dean Murray at his office in Medford. Dial in the 631-207-0073, or probably the easiest thing for you to do, Murray D, drop an email at murrayd@nyassembly.gov. If you heard something said on this program you want to react to, or you've got any kind of issue you think he could help you with, murrayd@nyassembly.gov. And Dean Murray, thanks as always for joining us for the program today. We want to thank you folks too for spending your time. We'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.